Cuba's history began with indigenous peoples, before Christopher Columbus arrived in 1492, leading to Spanish colonization, the establishment of sugar plantations, and the import of African slaves. After centuries of Spanish rule, Cuban independence movements culminated in the Spanish-American War in 1898, resulting in U.S. military occupation and eventual independence in 1902. The 1959 Cuban Revolution, led by Fidel Castro, established a communist government that aligned with the Soviet Union, leading to the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 and the long period of strained relations with the United States. Spanish colonial era and independence struggle. Indigenous people. Prior to European arrival, Cuba was inhabited by various indigenous cultures, such as the Taino. Spanish colonization. Christopher Columbus landed in 1492, and Spain began to colonize the island in 1511. The Spanish introduced sugar and tobacco plantations, which relied heavily on the forced labor of indigenous people and later, millions of enslaved Africans. Independence movements. The 19th century saw multiple failed rebellions against Spanish rule, including the 10 Years' War, 1868 to 1878, and the War of Independence, 1895 to 1898. Spanish-American War. The U.S. intervened in the final war for independence, defeating Spain in 1898. U.S. influence and the Cuban Revolution. U.S. occupation and independence. Following Spain's defeat, the U.S. occupied Cuba until granting it independence in 1902. However, the Platt Amendment gave the U.S. a right to intervene in Cuban affairs until it was repealed. In 1934, political instability. The early republic experienced corruption and political instability, with figures like Fulgencio Batista rising to power. The Cuban Revolution. In 1959, Fidel Castro, Che Guevara, and other revolutionaries overthrew Batista, establishing a socialist government. This led to a break in diplomatic relations with the United States and the implementation of a U.S. embargo. The Cold War and post-Cold War era. Alignment with the Soviet Union. Cuba became a close ally of the Soviet Union, a relationship that defined Cuban foreign policy and domestic life. Cuban Missile Crisis. The presence of Soviet nuclear missile bases in Cuba led to the 1962 crisis, which brought the world to the brink of nuclear war. Economic hardship. The collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, which had provided economic subsidies, devastated the Cuban economy, leading to a period of severe hardship. In the special period, recent changes. Power was transferred from Fidel Castro to his brother, Raul Castro, in 2006, and Miguel Díaz-Canel became president in 2019. The country has since seen gradual economic reforms and increased engagement with the international community.